The strongest man who ever lived did not fall on a battlefield. No army ever overpowered him. No weapon ever broke him. No enemy ever stood long enough to claim victory over his name. He walked through danger like it was nothing. He faced death, and death stepped aside. Yet one night, in silence, without struggle, without resistance, everything he had was taken from him. Not by force, not by war, but by the one person who sat closest to his heart. And when he rose from that moment, the strength that once made him unstoppable was gone, completely gone. Long before betrayal found him, Samson was never meant to live an ordinary life. His story began before his birth, before his first cry, before his first breath filled the air. He was chosen, set apart for something greater than survival, greater than reputation, greater than power. A divine purpose rested upon him. His life was marked by a covenant, a sacred vow that would define everything he was. No razor would ever touch his head, not as a symbol of appearance, but as a sign of obedience. And as long as that covenant remained unbroken, the strength of God would remain with him. Not strength that fades, not strength that weakens, but strength that defies nature itself. As he grew, that strength revealed itself in ways no one could ignore. It did not come slowly. It did not build over time. It appeared suddenly, undeniably, overwhelmingly. There came a day when a lion crossed his path, not caged, not restrained, wild, violent, dominant, the kind of creature that sends men running without thinking twice. Its roar tore through the air, a warning, a declaration of power. But Samson did not run. He did not search for a weapon. He did not call for help. He stepped forward. And in a moment that defied reason, he tore the lion apart with his bare hands. No blade, no shield, no hesitation, only power. Word began to spread, quietly at first, then rapidly, then uncontrollably. Stories of a man who could not be stopped, a man who stood alone, yet never fell. Enemies began to prepare for him. Armies gathered. Strategies were formed. Plans were executed. And still, they failed. Again and again and again. Where men fought with weapons, Samson fought with presence. Where others relied on numbers, he relied on what had been given to him. There were moments he stood against overwhelming opposition and walked away untouched. Moments where gates meant to protect entire cities were lifted and carried like nothing. Moments where fear itself seemed to follow him, not the other way around. He became more than a man in the eyes of many. He became a force, unshakable, unbreakable, unstoppable. But even the strongest force can be undone from within. There came a moment that did not look dangerous. No battlefield, no shouting, no weapons drawn, just a meeting, a glance, a connection. And that was where everything began to change. He saw her. Her name was Delilah. There was no warning attached to her presence, no visible sign of danger. She did not approach like an enemy. She did not speak like a threat. Her voice carried calmness. Her presence carried comfort. And slowly, without force, without resistance, she entered his world. What strength could not shake, affection began to soften. What battles could not weaken, connection began to influence. Time passed. Conversations grew. Trust formed. And somewhere in that space, a vulnerability opened. Not in his body, but in his heart. But beyond what Samson could see, something else was already moving. Those who feared him had not forgotten him. They had watched him, studied him, failed against him, and now they had chosen a different path. Not confrontation, but strategy. Not force, but influence. They approached Delilah with an offer. Not small, not simple, significant enough to change everything. All she needed to do was discover one thing: the source of his strength. That was all. Find the answer, and the man no one could defeat would fall. It began gently, a question placed into conversation like it meant nothing. Tell me, what makes you so strong? Samson heard it and answered lightly, not with truth, but with something that sounded believable. If they bind me with fresh bowstrings, I will become weak. That night, as he rested, the test was set. Carefully, quietly, without waking him. Then came the moment. Samson, the enemies are here. He woke instantly, as always, without fear, without doubt. The restraints broke as if they were never there. The plan failed. But the question did not end. It returned. Again and again. Each time wrapped in emotion. Each time delivered with more intensity. Why do you lie to me? Why won't you trust me? The tone shifted. What started as curiosity became pressure. What seemed harmless became persistent. Samson answered again. Another explanation, another condition. Ropes this time, stronger, new, and again, the same outcome. Broken. Still, it did not stop. The pattern continued. Questions, answers, attempts, failure. But something deeper was happening. Something invisible, but powerful. The pressure was building. Not outside, inside. Delilah's persistence became relentless. Not loud, not aggressive, but constant. Day after day, she asked. Night after night, she pressed. Her words became heavier, more personal. How can you say you love me when your actions say otherwise? The question lingered longer than any physical threat ever had. Because this time, it was not about strength. It was about trust. And slowly, the strongest man alive began to weaken, in a way he had never experienced before. Not in muscle, not in power, but in resistance. There is a kind of exhaustion that does not come from battle. It comes from pressure that never stops, from questions that never end, from emotions that keep pulling again and again until something gives. Samson reached that point. The resistance faded, the guard lowered, and in a moment that would change everything, he spoke the truth. My strength is tied to my hair. It has never been cut. If it is removed, I will become like any other man. The secret had been spoken, not forced, not taken, given. That night felt no different, no tension, no fear, just rest. He placed himself in a position of complete trust, and slowly he fell asleep. Then, in silence, it began. No sudden movement, no loud sound, just quiet action. The very thing that represented his covenant was removed, piece by piece, without resistance, without awareness, until it was gone. Then the moment came. Samson, the enemies are upon you. He woke, just as before, expecting the same result, expecting the same strength. But something was different, something he could not see, but immediately felt. He moved to rise, but the power was no longer there. No surge, no force, nothing. The strength that once defined him had left him, and he did not even realize when it happened. For the first time, there was no victory, no escape, no resistance, only capture. The man who once terrified armies was now helpless, bound, overpowered, taken. The fall was not just physical, it was complete. They took his sight, removed his freedom, reduced him to a shadow of who he once was. Mocked, displayed, broken. The strongest man alive, now standing in darkness, with nothing left. And all of it traced back to a moment of trust placed in the wrong hands. Time moved, slowly, quietly, without announcement. And in that silence, something small began to return. His hair, growing again. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. a quiet reminder that not everything had been lost. There came a day when he was brought out again, not as a warrior, but as entertainment, a figure to be laughed at, placed between pillars, surrounded by voices that once feared him, now filled with mockery. But something within him had changed, not outwardly, but deeply. In that moment, he turned to God, not with pride, not with confidence, but with humility, a single request. Remember me, just this once. And in that moment, strength returned, not the same as before, not for pride, not for display, but for purpose. He placed his hands against the pillars, steady, focused, final. And with one movement, everything came down. The structure collapsed, the noise ended, and in that final act, Samson fulfilled the purpose he was born for. Strength alone did not define him. Power alone did not sustain him. Because the greatest battles are not always visible. They are fought in choices, in trust, in moments that seem small, but carry consequences that last a lifetime. If this story held your attention, if you felt the rise, the fall, and the weight of every decision, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. More stories are coming, stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. He was the strongest man alive, yet strength was not what destroyed him. Trust was. And sometimes the greatest fall does not come from enemies. It comes from the one you never thought would betray you.